Hi there, I'm Michael Martinez. I'm the principal author of the SEO Theory blog and the president of Reflective Dynamics. And I'm here with Kent Younk, vice president of Roaring Pajamas SEO. Hello, Kent.
Hello, Michael.
So it's been a few weeks since we recorded our last video, which is okay. We've both been very busy, but was finally able to get all the videos released, and hopefully people are enjoying them. Kent has a topic that he wanted to talk about today. I was telling him earlier that my partner Randy and I every year we try to sell some websites. We develop websites and build them up, and then we try to sell them to people who can take them further. And so he suggested that we might want to talk about what's involved in moving a website. You know, you've acquired a website or someone else is acquiring it from you. And Kent, you had quite a little checklist there. You think you could run that in again? Points we might want to touch on?
Well, yeah, I think the challenge and what a lot of people don't realize is, number one, there's a market for websites. So there are websites out there that people create their own sort of, topical website. It gets traffic, and they might have an actual email list that goes with it. And somebody comes along and says, hey, I can really do something with that, and it's compatible with, some of my other content-driven initiatives. So they say, okay, we'll offer you X dollars for that, and they buy the website. And so what are all of those things that affect that? And one of the things that I find, and a lot of people are not aware of, is that not only is the website age of the URL, the ownership of the URL, the IP address that it's located on, the servers that are associated with that website, and other, in some cases, the nature of some of the websites that are hosted with it, and then of course, if you look at sort of the marketing aspects of that, if you're doing your own email marketing and using your own email tools from your server, it takes quite a while to build up authority and trust for an IP address from an email standpoint as well. So those are all things that get affected when you consider moving the location of both your website, your email server, all of the things that sort of affect the sort of the web marketing aspect. And certainly, because Michael and I are very close to this, certainly the stuff that affects SEO, right? We care very, very, very much about, if you're going to choose to sell a site, what are some of the issues that come up when you're thinking about moving that website to a new host. You may even want to move the content that's on that website to a new platform, and that might affect the structure of the URLs. So there's a big long list of sort of checkboxes that you have to consider when either acquiring or selling a site, and the effects that will have on the value of that content, the popularity of that content in the search engines, and certainly the ability to promote that content using your own email servers. So those were the things that I thought were really super important, should be considered. And if they're not considered and things change dramatically, it can really affect your SEO, performance in search, your ability to your deliverability of your your emails. I mean, there's a whole range of issues that happen around that.
There are, and we're not going to be able to cover all of them in 30 minutes or so. But you did touch on some interesting stuff that I've run into in the past. For example, the email IP address issue. That's a big problem these days, and it was a big problem for me many years ago, because when you get a new IP address, for whatever reason, if you don't vet it with the online blacklists, you might be moving from a relatively clean IP address to one that nobody's going to get any email from. And I've actually run into that problem and have had to request replacement IP addresses from web hosting vendors. I think I've had to do that twice, maybe 3 times over the past 15 years because we didn't know in advance that the IP addresses had been abused by spammers and were, in some cases, permanently blacklisted. Some of the major internet access providers like Mindspring have a reputation, or used to have a reputation, for permanently banning IP addresses from their email systems. I don't know if they still do that, but when I first ran into that with Mindspring, I was just blown away. I couldn't believe that they would just write off emails to their customers, forever, because one person had temporarily used an email, an IP address that way. Another thing that I've run into is sometimes you get a big website that's running on a huge server or some large bundle of resources, and you try to move it to an account that doesn't have those resources, and suddenly everything just bogs down or breaks. And so people, when they're buying websites, need to do a little bit of due diligence, find out what the hosting arrangements are for the website that they're acquiring. If you're selling a website, I guess you don't have to tell people, how big it is. You can just assume that they'll ask you those questions, but it would be kind of a courteous thing to do to mention that you've got a 0.5 gigabyte database. If I were to sell Zenite.org and SF Phantom now, I'm not sure how I would move the databases, to be honest. They're so big that backing them up is a real chore. And those ancient websites that are constantly adding more content, they just have a lot of data. And when you and I were at Quinn Street, somebody acquired, one of the departments acquired a new website, and they asked me to do a quick SEO audit or something like that. And I forget what my reason was, but I asked for access to their historical server-side log data. And it took the guy 10 hours to upload it to the servers in the Quinn Street data center. So, I mean, when people are out there buying and selling websites, you're not just buying a domain name or the pages that you see on the web. You're buying a database. You're buying email addresses. You're buying everything that goes into marketing a website. And it has a huge impact.
Yeah, you're talking about social media accounts. You're talking about accounts on business directories. You're talking about all kinds of connections that you create to have a business online. So it's extensive.
And people who buy websites are not always interested in all that stuff. Randy and I have found ourselves in some strange situations where we've transferred ownership of websites to other people, and they don't pick up the social media accounts, or they don't take the advertising off the sites. They might add their own advertising. We're not sure what they do with them, but they'll spend thousands of dollars on a website and just leave our advertising there. And that's a dangerous thing. If you're running AdSense on a website and you sell the AdSense website to somebody else, if they start violating the program guidelines, you're going to hang for it, because that's your AdSense code on there. Now, fortunately, the AdSense program has made it possible for us to claim websites. So we can go in to the AdSense dashboard and say, this is my website. Everything that's running on this website, I'm responsible for. And so they'll look at what you own versus what's being reported for you. And they promise, so far we haven't been thrown out of the program, but they promise that they will ignore stuff that's suspicious that you're not claiming. But 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. You were kind of really at risk if you sold an AdSense website and the other guy didn't take the code off. But we still make money off of some websites that we've sold because they never replace the advertising.
Found money. I love it.
Yeah. As long as we don't get in trouble with anybody, we don't care. And we make an effort to remind people. We'll send 2 or 3 reminders over as many months, 2 or 3 months. Hey, you need to update the code. One guy, he kept the site for like a year and a half, and he turned around and sold it to somebody else. And so we can't even contact the other person. We're still getting credit for traffic to that website. Just blows me away. So, well, I mean, let's see if we can go down your checklist a little bit there, and let's talk a little bit about URLs, okay? Because that's a big deal in any SEO project. URLs. Let's just say that you have 1 million URLs, and there are different reasons why you might have to change URLs. Like somebody has their own in-house content management system, and you have your in-house content management system. So you're going to transfer one to the other, but your two CMSs generate URLs differently. You've run into a situation like that, right?
Of course, and part of the challenge there is know that going in, because the last thing that I recommend people do is change URL structure if the URLs look good and there's good traffic and links to those pages, because if you have to change the URL and redirect them, you often will end up having to end up losing value to those pages because you're redirecting and the URLs may not be as nice and clean anymore, and so there are a bunch of different issues.
Yeah, it takes search engines a while to crawl through all the redirects. There's no guarantee if you upload a new XML sitemap that they're going to just honor that. They don't forget old URLs instantaneously. It just doesn't happen. And you'll see lots of crawl come through that you don't want. I know that at Quinn Street they acquired some big websites that had duplicate content. They would just publish the same article in 3 or 4 folders, and the effort to canonicalize that content was massive. I think it took months on one website alone. The way that people structure their URLs for like Google News might be very different from the way you structure your URLs for Google News. And how are you going to deal with that? Because you've got all this history associated with the old URLs. That's a big issue. Now, of course, one thing about news search is that it tends to focus on fresh content, but that's not always the case there either. You can do historical searches in news search, and I know that because I actually do use historical news searches. And so if those URLs go away, and everybody goes, well, it's all just fresh content. We don't need to worry about the old stuff. You're breaking a lot of potential crawl and traffic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's painful, and the sad part is that if somebody buys a website thinking that, hey, they're going to have all this revenue associated with it, and then they make these massive changes where they're moving domains and updating URLs, 6 months later, they're like, oh, why is it only making 10% of what it made, when I bought it? Yeah. And, that's painful for folks, and painful for them to not realize the overall impact. Right?
And people
are
really not understanding it. Yeah, people are quick to blame the other guy too. It's not always that you got ripped off. It's a lot of the times it's just that the process of moving breaks something. If you buy a website from halfway around the world that's hosted halfway around the world, and you get it set up properly in your area, your geolocation, that's going to shift the balance of lag times. So visitors that were used to a fast website on the other side of the world are now going to see a slow website, whereas the visitors in your part of the world that were used to a slow website are going to see a faster website. And people don't realize that these lag times are out there affecting things. I've worked with people who moved websites to local data centers because they just wanted to have access. They wanted it to be good for them, and yet their market was in another country, and they had to compensate for the lag times that those moves brought on.
Now, do you recommend, when somebody runs into that problem, do you recommend that they use a caching service?
Well, you mean like
like a CDN?
Yeah, CDN. That's actually a good solution. I mean, it's not a cheap solution necessarily, but it's a fast solution if you can get it set up. Because the CDN depends on how large your website is, right, and how much you're planning to change it. But at least with a CDN, they're going to cache it in different locations around the world, and so that issue of lag times kind of goes away. And so that is a good solution for people who are moving websites across vast geographical distances, data center to data center. There are other things you can do. You can buy faster, more powerful servers in tier one data centers. Those are very expensive. Tier one is the very top. It's the tier one data centers are connected to all the big gateways, and they just have massive amounts of bandwidth, just really fast. Most small websites are not running in tier one data centers. That it's too expensive, and those web hosting companies are putting you in second or even third tier data centers. But tier one data centers are just massive commercial operations.
Yep. And I think that's, again, another important point. And certainly, that's a good solution for people moving geolocations. But what about people who really don't understand the nature of domains and the potential for acquiring a domain without, in other words, for instance, I had some friends that built a website and it was their name, right? But there was a brand in another country that wanted that domain, that .com domain, and they were basically they basically had a site that talked all about military weaponry, and because one of them had been a former military person, so and it was being acquired by a company that sold computers, right? So they knew that these guys were going to want to buy their site, and so they built it up with a bunch of content and some discussion boards and things like that, so that the site would be more heavily trafficked and more built up before they actually, because they frankly didn't want the website or any of the web content. They just wanted the domain. So it's interesting that some people don't even know that they're sitting on a potential gold mine. They just think it's their happy little content site, but sometimes it's just the value of that domain.
The domain name, yeah. I've worked with a couple of people who wanted a domain name, and they went out and tried to get it, and just threw the old content away, or they did never. One guy picked up a domain on Turnaround, and so he didn't even have the content, but he wanted the domain name. That one, the rebranding took a couple of years. That was an e-commerce website, and it was hit by the Google Panda algorithm almost as soon as he went live.
Really?
Yeah, because he was entering a competitive market, and all of his product listings were basically the same as everybody else's, and so it took them a while to differentiate their business. I think now when I search on that company, it comes up better, but for months after they retained my services, and they weren't able to act on my advice. They were just swamped with all this technical work doing with their database. But I would run searches on their business name, and the old website information would appear in Google, because with the Panda algorithm, the crawl was slowed down. And so it takes longer for Google to recognize significant changes, when you have a Panda issue. And that was unfortunate, because he created a huge website where there had been a not so huge website before. All the URLs were different, and he just saddled himself with a Panda problem the old site did not have. There were a lot of links from the old site's backlink profile that were sending traffic irrelevant traffic to his website. Because he was an e-commerce site, it was kind of an opportunistic thing, I think. People might go, what the heck is this? But maybe some of them hung around and perhaps bought some stuff. I doubt very many would have, but it's possible. It's conceivable.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But that thing does kind of happen where, yeah, brand A wants brand B's domain name. They're both using basically the same domain, or the same business name, I guess we could say. But they're two different businesses, and that causes confusion among people who don't really understand trademark law, because you can have multiple businesses using the same trademark as long as it doesn't create consumer confusion for either business.
Right.
Another issue that I've run into when moving websites around, not necessarily due to acquisitions, but if you go from server A to server B, if you have to check the levels of your PHP and SQL services. If you're going from newer to older, that breaks things. Sometimes it breaks things if you go from older to newer, but I've had to go in and modify SQL files to take out references to commands that aren't used in older versions of SQL. I'm not sure. I ran into the PHP difference problem one time. I don't recall exactly how we fixed that. But the website, it's not going to run properly or at all if you don't have compatible software systems, when you transfer the websites. And so
right.
that's an issue that seriously affects SEO. The longer your website is down, the longer it'll take for it to come back up, because the search engines are gradually going to start delisting stuff from their indexes.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that, especially with e-commerce websites where people are trying to do a lot of consumer-facing commerce, it's wise to buy an existing site versus try to build it up from scratch?
Well, you and I certainly saw the risks that entails in the lead generation industry. If somebody is building a website for the purpose of selling it, the temptation to fluff up the perceived value is very strong.
Oh yeah.
We sometimes people that look at our websites complain about the backlink profiles, because not every link comes from a website that is in the major indexes, or Ahrefs or Majestic or Moz or something like that. And there's all sorts of reasons. So we'll share with them the backlink reports from Google Search Console and Bing Webmaster Toolbox, because that's really the links that matter. What Moz or Ahrefs or Majestic finds really doesn't matter to Bing or Google. And so people might puff up their websites with high domain authority or high, Ahrefs scores, or whatever the metric is that you're using to evaluate websites. I don't really try to talk people out of using those tools, but I do kind of point out to them that they're looking at rather iffy data, and it doesn't really match up with what the search engines are doing or using.
Well, and I think that's the point. The problem is that people don't employ an expert when they do these acquisitions, in some cases. So, it's just between the lawyers, and I think that's a challenge.
Well, a lot of people that have been running websites on their own, they feel competent in basic SEO issues because they've been using SEO plugins or reading Moz or whatever, and they're not really doing it. They're just kind of thumbing through the pages of the manual, so to speak. And
paint by numbers.
Yeah, paint by numbers SEO. I ran into it earlier this week in an online group where somebody reported that they were having trouble seeing pages on their website that they had just acquired, and they weren't sure what Google was going to make of it. And so people were going, well, just run it through this SEO plugin. And if the SEO plugin doesn't see it, then Google doesn't see it. And I had to figure out a polite way to say, well, you know, it doesn't matter how good you think the SEO plugin is. If you want to know whether Google can see all the content on the page or not, either look at the cache in the Google search index, or go log into Google Search Console and do a Googlebot fetch and render, and Google will tell you what it can see, basically. But people become so dependent on what others are telling them about SEO that they feel more confident in their SEO knowledge than they really are, or really deserve to be. And so that can have a significant impact on performance after an acquisition, because people don't know what to look for, or how to look for it.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're coming up on the 30-minute mark here. So
this was a good topic, because I think it's something that doesn't often get talked about and looked at. There's certainly a lot of forums around the buying and selling of just domain names, but not necessarily websites.
Yeah, I think if somebody just wants to buy a domain name and they don't care about the content, they're just going to get rid of the content. All they want is the domain name. They're probably a little bit better off. Although the backlink profile is still something that concerns a lot of people. And of course, there are people who are buying domains for the backlinks. I would not ever trust a third-party link report for that kind of a purchase. I would want to see the Google and Bing data on the backlinks, and just go with that. There are some people who are just trying to get into a brand name, the best fit for a brand name, and they'll let the backlinks figure themselves out. Because if those websites are being updated, people will eventually notice. A lot of people will, and they'll take the links down. Not everybody's going to do that, but I have seen backlink profiles change over time. So,
great.
Well, that was a good discussion. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll appreciate it if you'll share the video. We are trying to keep these videos to 30 minutes. We know that's a lot of time out of your day, but we're trying to create good videos that you can show to your teams, and maybe incorporate into your training programs free of charge. Again, I'm Michael Martinez with Reflective Dynamics, and this is Kent Young of Roaring Pajamas SEO. So,
have a great day.
Next time. Bye.